On July 27th, I was in a motorcycle accident. I was hit by a gentleman who was on his cell phone. He told the officer that he knew I was there, but he couldn't see me in his mirror, so he changed lanes anyway. Sorry, gotta scoot back a little bit. Which was really interesting because he then promptly went home. I was laying on the ground and a bunch of people were nice enough to help me. And he called in and said, "Hey, I think I just hit a motorcyclist," after he got home. But then he came back down there and they did not give him a ticket for hit and run. Go figure. Even though the officer was a motorcycle officer, I thought that was very interesting. But anyway, that doesn't really have anything to do with RSD. But it really didn't help me because I landed on my left shoulder, which again caused the RSD to go there. It seems to go to places that you have injuries in, of which I have quite a few. Let's see, then in May of 08, I had for years had problems, and we went in and checked. I had an esophagram, which is where they make you swallow the icky liquid, and it came out that I have a hiatal hernia, and that was real fun. Anyway, then they did, in February of 08, they did a full body scan. So on the MRI, so I have herniated discs or bulging of discs in L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L4, L5, L5, S1, C2, C3, C3, C4, C5, 4, 5, C5, 6, and I guess T2, T3-T4, which I guess is your tailbone. But in 09, we moved to Texas out of the Seattle area. And so since I've been here, I've been, quote, on maintenance as far as my pills go. And I haven't had any major injuries. But then again, I don't do a whole heck of a lot just because of the pain. So anyway, everything was going along pretty good. And our church had a mission trip to Peru scheduled for September 1 through 10 of 2017. And so I thought I'd go. And my wife was like, "Yeah, you need to go to Peru." So part of having to get to go to Peru was getting a yellow fever shot. And so I really didn't want a shot, but I put it off as long as possible. And then July 30th, I went in and had that yellow fever shot. And wouldn't you know it, so of course it hurt behind the shot, back of my arm hurt, and had hurt for a couple of weeks. And then my ribs on my left side started hurting, and they hurt for a couple of weeks. And then after I came back from Peru, it moved into my stomach. So now I have RSD living in my stomach, in my esophagus, which is just wonderful. Makes eating and sleeping a joy. I've learned to sleep sitting up on the couch. How about that? Anyway, so some of the medications that I was on, and I will try to mention them as best I can. I don't do all that good with names like this, but so gabapentin, I tried that. It wasn't helpful. Topical ketamine, it wasn't helpful. Cymbalta wasn't helpful. It had side effects. Namita, whatever. Naminda. It helped, but it made other things worse. I noticed that with some of the shots in 05, 06, that after having 3 or 4 of them, I started hurting more, which was really weird. Anyway, methadone, was a medication I was on. Didn't like that. It made me stop breathing in the middle of the night. That really concerned my wife. Hydrocodone and bupropion, which is Wellbutrin, which they put me on that for depression, but it was more for because the pain receptors that do depression are the same ones that deal with chronic pain. So your frontal lobe handles both your depression and your chronic pain. And my wife has done a lot of reading and research on this over the years, and she's noticed that people who have like ADD, ADHD, which I do, people who are bipolar or whatever, tend to be people who get CRPS. So, which is kind of interesting. I don't think they've ever really looked into that scientifically, but just something she's noticed in her reading. All right, so here's the nifty list of, and this is not complete, unfortunately. Depakote, Soma, Naproxen, Diffusal, Reflin, Omeprazole, Promethean, Hydro is Exine. I'm not sure what that one is. Nemedia, magnesium, Crestor, Provastin, whatever, topical ketamine, fentanyl patches, gabapentin, valproic acid, morphine. Morphine makes me heave my guts out. Oxy, Hydro, Cymbalta. Cymbalta didn't help. You know, and that's the hardest part about that kind of stuff is you read up on this stuff and you think, oh, this one's going to do it, and then it doesn't, and you get depressed. So, all right, I'm going to go into the next part of this. Oh yeah, let's see. I had a TENS unit. I have a TENS unit. I saw a chiropractor for years. Did all the medications, physical therapy. Had sympathetic nerve blocks. Had massage therapy. I mean, everything. We don't have one of the expensive chairs, but we have a massage chair upstairs. And you know, they work, but they stop. They don't work for very long. They might work for a week if you're lucky, but not much after that. So anyway, so here I'm going to read. I'm going to read this part. This is people call it my testimony in the Christian world, and the reason I'm going to read that is because they kind of walk hand in hand. I'll read it and explain it as I go, and you'll probably figure out what's going on. Anyway, so I grew up in Oregon and Washington State, or states. I was raised in an atheistic household. We went to church like maybe on Easter, but not very often, and definitely on Christmas, because I think everybody was supposed to go on Christmas, right? But we were never told anything about whether there was a God, wasn't a God, whether one existed or anything. It was, it just wasn't spoken of in our household. Since I had no knowledge or foundation of spiritual things, I was kind of like an empty cup when I entered college, which I think a lot of people are. And I studied evolution, but frankly, evolution has so many flaws. You can't find things at different levels in soil and then call them the same thing. You can't find them different, 10 feet apart and call them the same thing. People try to fit whatever they find into their theology, so to speak, or whatever their little world is, and then try to make it speak volumes, and it just doesn't work that way. So, but I did at that point in time have a great time picking on Christians that I met in college, because most of them lived the same lifestyle I was. I was drinking, doing drugs, um, looking for girls, and um, a lot of the young Christian males I met were doing the same drugs and drinking and cruising that I was. And so, problem was they had no clue as to what the Bible said. And so I had a field day with those guys because I knew evolution, even though I didn't agree with it at that point. But I had a great time picking on those Christians for not knowing what their Bible says. So if you're a Christian and you are watching this, you'd better know what it says. And if you're listening to secular music, get out of it, because as the Bible does say, what does light have to do with darkness? There is nothing there for you. All you got to do is listen to the lyrics, and that should chase you away. If you got a problem with that, that's your problem. You can deal with it. Anyway, my life revolved, well, let's see, around my parents and athletics at that time. But my parents were kind of non-existent while I was growing up. My dad wanted nothing to do with his children. When he was around, he was abusive and drinking, usually drunk. That's really the way I remember him. My life revolved around staying involved in sports to stay out of the house as much as possible. I found my identity in playing football, in wrestling, running, track, doing judo during the off season, which was during summers. I went hunting or hiking to stay out of the house. I also spent a lot of time in the barn with my sheep, and because I showed sheep in 4-H. We had chickens and a couple of horses, so I was always outside doing something. There was always something I could do to stay away and not go in the house, because as soon as I did, my dad would be in there drinking or whatever. So then my junior year in high school in 1979, I got hurt playing football. I had my first knee surgery, which I mentioned earlier, in September. And in September of 1980, I was butted by my ram and had my second knee surgery. At this point, my self-image and my happiness really began to unravel. I had to let my involvements go because I had, a scholarship to college to wrestle, and to be honest, I just wanted to walk without limping. So a lot of people felt I let them down, but I didn't really care at that point. I wanted to walk and walk without limping. And I still walk without limping, but it's more just because I'm ornery rather than because it feels good. If I were to relax, I start limping like crazy. But anyway, during my freshman year of college, as I said, I'd make fun of Christians. I ran into because they were drinking and doing drugs the same as I was and listening to the same music I was. There was no difference in their lives, and they didn't know what they believed or why they believed it. This worked until I ran into two girls who knew what they believed and why they believed it. They were the first to present the whole gospel to me. I didn't believe it, or I didn't believe it at that time, but over the next few weeks as I talked to them, I started to question really everything I knew about and wondered if there really was a God in charge of everything. I used to really enjoy going out and sitting looking at the stars, and I kind of wondered a lot of times if there wasn't something out there bigger than us. Now, you wonder about aliens, right? Yes, I've seen a bright, glowing something in the sky that was barely above the treetops, that moved from horizon to horizon and went not quite over the top of me, but very close to it, very quickly. As a matter of fact, I had just left someone else, and I said, "Hey, do you see that thing that's like almost over you?" And they're like, "What?" I said, "Do you see the thing that's almost," and it was gone. So in the time that I had to say that, it had come from as far north as I could see to going over the top of me and her, going south of us